26. We were the first kids out of Bat Masterson Junior High School when the bell rang. The bus rolled up and we got on. We half walked, half trotted from the bus station to Samuel Kogarsh's shop. The Laughing Alligator motorcycles were parked outside. In the front part of the shop, the brothers of the Laughing Alligator were leafing through books and giggling. They winked and nodded to us as we came in. In the back of the shop, Samuel Kogarsh and Clarence Yojimbo were sitting on folding chairs. They were drinking hot chocolate with double marshmallows and whipped cream from paper containers. Apparently, they had sent out to the Bermuda Triangle chili parlor. "Ah, there you are, boys," Samuel Kogarsh said. "Clarence Yojimbo has only been here a little while. Your hot chocolate is still hot, although I'm afraid the marshmallows have completely melted by this time." He offered us 2 cardboard containers. I noticed that the cover was off the Test Your Brainpower machine. Apparently Samuel Kogarsh had been testing Clarence Yojimbo's brainpower before we arrived. The tube in which the red liquid rose to show you how advanced you were had melted, and the red stuff had dribbled all over the front of the machine. The filing cabinet drawers were open, and Samuel Kogarsh's mimeograph courses were all over the place. Also, the old-time radios and other scientific equipment looked as though they'd been given a workout. Samuel Kogarsh's polka dot tie was crooked, and he had spilled some hot chocolate on his pink shirt. "We've been going over some of Kogarsh's research and educational material," Clarence Yojimbo said. "I was able to point out quite a few things that we have to be corrected immediately. Isn't that right, Sam?" "Absolutely, yes, sir, this very day, sir," Samuel Kogarsh said. "Can I run out and get you some more hot chocolate, a cheeseburger, the contents of my savings account, Havana cigars?" "Thank you," Clarence Yojimbo said. "I don't require anything at this time. Why don't you just take a chair and rest? I have to discuss a few things with Aln and Leonard." "Yes, sir. Thank you. I'll sit down now. Thank you," Samuel Kogarsh said. He seemed to be trying very hard to be extra polite to Clarence Yojimbo. "Now, boys, let me bring you up to date. It seems that our friend Mr. Kogarsh has made somewhat of the same error as that of Rodney Rubenstein and other psychic and extraterrestrial scholars. He's become aware of certain things, but doesn't understand their use or significance. It's a little like this. Suppose there was no such thing as an automobile, and you came upon a good-as-new 1961 Studebaker Lark, all gassed up and ready to go. You'd call everybody to come and marvel at your discovery, but instead of realizing that it was a machine which had the power to carry people from place to place, suppose you and everyone else thought the purpose of that 1961 Studebaker Lark was to sit in front of the front seat and play the radio. You'd have pretty much missed the point. Don't you agree?" "Sure," we said. "Thank you for referring to me as your friend," Samuel Kogarsh said. "Well, this is what happened to the students of Strange Phenomena," Clarence Yojimbo said. "Erich von Dankeny somehow guessed that persons from other planets had been visiting the Earth for many thousands of years, but then he mixes up with the pyramids and cave paintings and all the things, and of all things, the history of religion. Utter nonsense. And Rodney Rubenstein seems to have found out that, in some places, large rocks and so forth can be moved by mental power, and he makes the assumption that this is something that the Earth people should be able to do as well. Then he goes ahead and doctors certain books, like my dictionary, to support his ideas. All very shocking." "Shocking," Samuel Kogarsh said. "And our friend, Mr. Kogarsh—" "Thank you," said Samuel Kogarsh, "packages the stuff and sells it to people, believing, of course, that he is doing nothing wrong." "I swear," said Samuel Kogarsh. "But, you see, it is very wrong. It would only be foolish to discover a brand new 1961 Studebaker and mistake it for a machine for listening to the radio, but to encourage people to do mind control stunts is much more than foolish. It is very dangerous." "Dangerous," said Samuel Kogarsh. "Now you boys listen to Mr. Yojimbo." "But we didn't do anything evil," Aln Mndlshn said. "That's right," I said. "We were just having fun. We wouldn't have used our powers to hurt anyone." "Except yourselves," Clarence Yojimbo said. "If you got the idea that all that these powers were good for was tricks, then you'd be limited forever from ever finding out what their real uses were. You'd end up like," he looked at Samuel Kogarsh, "like Rodney Rubenstein." "Mr. Yojimbo, is that chair comfortable?" Samuel Kogarsh asked. "I have a nice easy chair at home. I could get it." "I'm just fine like this," Clarence Yojimbo said. "Now I want to explain everything to these boys. You see, You are the first people, regular Earth people, ever to attain what Mr. Klugarsh calls State 26 at will. Other people have attained it, but only at certain moments and by accident. Somehow, from Klugarsh's moronic instructions, you've learned how to turn it on and off like a light switch. Now, while it's perfectly true that a person in State 26 can, to some extent, transmit his thoughts and get people and even objects to do his bidding, that's not really what State 26 is good for. The point of State 26 is not to make yourself into a radio transmitter, but to make yourself into a radio receiver. In other words, instead of trying to put out messages, you should be picking them up. It's much more useful and much more interesting. Well, we had sort of begun to get bored with giving people commands, Aln Mndlshn said. That's when we got into levitating bricks and such, I put in. And you would have gotten bored with levitating bricks and even whole houses soon, Clarence Yojimbo said. Some people never get bored with stupid games, but usually when a person gets to be able to do something pointless like transmit his thoughts, he soon realizes just how dull it is. Now tell me the truth. Except for some boorish mischief, can you think of any good use for sending mental commands? We couldn't. But what about moving objects by mental power? I asked. That could be useful for putting up buildings and things like that, couldn't it? Why do you suppose God gave us hands and brains that can figure out how to do things? The Venusian said. You know, there are people who believe that the pyramids and the Easter Island statues were erected by some kind of magical power that the ancient people learned from extraterrestrials. The reason they think this is because it hurts their pride that they can't figure out how it was done. They don't want to believe that some ancient Eastern Islander knew as much about engineering as they do, but none of that stuff about spacemen building the great monuments of the ancient world is true. All those things were done by humans, using their human gifts, including, but not depending on, moments of inspiration or intuition, or State 26, as Sam here calls it. Now, I want to explain about Mu and Atlantis, and Lemuria, and Nafsulia, and Waka Waka, all these lost continents. This is going to be a little tricky to understand, so feel free to ask questions as I go along. None of them are ever lost. What do you mean, none of them are ever... You mean none of them ever existed? I asked. All of them existed, and still do. They aren't exactly continents, but they exist. Oh, not called Waka Waka or Atlantis. Those are just made-up names for them, but they're real. Where are they? Aln Mndlshn asked. Here, Clarence Yojimbo said. Right here. He was right. It was tricky to understand, and we said so. I'll explain. Maybe you've read about evacuations of ancient cities, like Troy. After the archaeologists dig down and find the ancient city, sometimes they find that there's still another more ancient city underneath. Then they find that that there's another city underneath that one, even more ancient. They find layers, levels. The so-called lost continents or lost societies are a little like that. Do you mean that if we dug straight down, we'd find Atlantis? Aln Mndlshn asked. If you dug straight down, you'd find the Hogborough Municipal Sewer, Clarence Yojimbo said. To find Atlantis, you have to dig straight down within yourself. So Atlantis exists in our imagination? Our memory? I asked. If you like, Clarence Yojimbo said. I prefer to believe that it exists outside ourselves, but we can only find it by going inside. I'm getting confused, Aln Mndlshn said. So am I, said I. I've been confused since last night, Samuel Klugarsh said. How about we break for a snack? I can run around the corner for some frozen yogurt for us and the Laughing Alligator Brothers. By the way, how are you doing out there? We peeked into the front of the store. The brothers of the Laughing Alligator were taking turns reading a Scientology book to each other and cracking up laughing. Reynold and Hamilton will go with you to help bring back the yogurt, Clarence Yojimbo said. It's a good idea. I'm getting dry from all this talking.